This is Dwayne Gold with SCD Stories, and today's podcast, we have the great privilege of talking to someone who is not just a parent, but someone who's an advocate in the whole industry of social work and mental health and so many other aspects of living, that everyday living that any of us have to do. Well, it's interesting in this idea of interviewing people, you often will run across what we call these overachievers. And today's guest is no different. She is remarkable as a wife and a mother, but yet also an advocate and someone who cares in this industry. She has the great privilege of caring for two children with sickle cell. We're going to learn all about it. We want to get a chance to meet her personally. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Destiny Vanscriber is with us. And Destiny, before we get going, I didn't intentionally talk much about your educational path because I want people to know about you first, and then we'll come back and cover that. Tell us about you. What's with you, and as an author, writer of sickle cell, what's that about for you and why?
It's such an honor and such a privilege to be able to reach the community and provide them with a book that really speaks to them and they can relate to and share with other people. I just feel so honored to be able to be in this position to do that, to share my work with the community and also influence other generations.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. I kind of cheated. I had no idea who you were. Last month or a month before last, we had a couple of events and had the privilege of having these books from our friends at the Hilton Publishing Company. And this book is called Sickle Cell Superheroes. I don't know anything about the author, but when reading through it, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's really cool. And before we talk about the book that you've written, I wanted you to know this was going to happen no matter who the author was. I just had the great privilege of it being you. And now knowing the story behind the book, you're not just writing about something that you've studied and learned, but you're writing about something you're living. And so, if you don't mind, tell us about it. You have two daughters, and tell us a little bit about your daughters and give us their names, so we can actually see some vividness to what's really going on with you behind this book.
I have two young daughters, Kimora and Kylie. They're both wonderful, talented, beautiful children. They both happen to be diagnosed with sickle cell disease, and this book really relates to their journey and the ups and downs of sickle cell, and then just also making sure that people know that even though they have sickle cell, they're not defined by sickle cell. There's much more to them than just this disease, and that they can have a good quality of life if they have the right support and family support that they need. And that takes people becoming educated in sickle cell disease, their village, their family, so that they can be as successful as possible.
Well, and I get that from the book as I think it's so unique that as the author, you put yourself in third person or as one of your daughters, and as you introduce yourself like a normal, how Superman has his, I'm really Clark Kent, I just do this thing, but there's another side of me where Superman comes out. That's what I was visualizing as I was reading your book. And what made me read it wasn't that we had it available. Destiny, what made me read it was when we were at this event, I was seeing little kids eating their candy or their snacks while they're sitting down reading through the book and watching them turn the page. Because oftentimes when it comes to something like sickle cell or any chronic illness, it is very boring and not engaging for a child to want to read, male or female. And so what I thought was unique, your cover, you did a great job of being attracting or creating a magnetism that makes a young person want to, what's this about? It is while my parents are talking all this boring stuff to these people at these booths and so forth, I'm going to sit there and read it. And I want you to know you've done a great job, you and your publishing company or whatever you guys have done, to make it attractive so someone wants to open it and read it. But what I saw was young people turning the pages while reading it. And
Oh, thank you.
yeah, so even though you're out in California, over in Pennsylvania, we took a couple of boxes and we watched them, hey, do you have any more of those books? Yeah, you gave my cousin one of those books. Do you have any more of those? And that's what happened. And so there were a lot of books that were left on the table. But your choice of colors, your choice in the title by superheroes and showing individuals of all different types of background as superheroes, you've done a great job before we even get into the content inside the book. So, what you're listening to is a conversation with now my good friend Destiny Van Scriver, who's an author, but not just an author. Before she ever wrote the book, she spent her years grinding it to meal to understand how to better care for those who deal with mental health and things related to their psychology. She's done her undergrad in biology and psychology, or biology, science, and psychology. And you didn't know this, Destiny Van Scriver, but my undergrad was biology and chemistry. So there's already was some sort of a synchronization thing going on there, And but to know that you have that background and then you went into getting your degree in social work, your master's degree in social work, and spending your time at USC and Tennessee and other colleges, it's so remarkable because you don't have to have all that background to write about this. What I'm getting is you're not flaunting your credentials. What you're doing is you're saying, I'm a parent and my child has to find their identity in this sickle cell. And so let me ask you about it. I mean, you could have stuck that throughout this book, and we saw a human being being able to see their value and their identity beyond their chronic illness. So you walk me through that. What happened that made you say, I got to write this book? Clearly, it's something to do with your children, but you tell us so I don't guess and mess up your story.
So I wrote this book, and you can see the cover. The little girl, she has on a cape. She has on a cape because I want people to feel empowered when they read this book, even though they have sickle cell, and to know that they can live a good quality of life and be the true hero of their own story. This story really sparked with me years ago when my daughter went to school, and some of the other kids, they found out that she had sickle cell, and it was a very negative experience. You have kids feeling like she might be contagious or they might get it, and there was no literature in the school that can really explain to the other children what this disease was and what it meant, and if they would be impacted by, associated with my children.
Hmm.
So I really wrote this books, and also I donated my books to their schools for their library so that if any child ever went to the school and they had sickle cell, instead of other kids talking about it in a negative way, they can access this information and read the book in a way that they would understand and accept it and understand it, that these children are like everyone else who wants to have a friend.
Wow. And I'd say you've done that. I'm certain the impact that it's probably had on your children just inside the household, but the fact that you're able to touch other children's lives shows a lot more about the person that you are and having that passion. It's not just selfish to only care for your daughters, because you clearly could have wrote this at home and just shared it with them and helped them to get through it. And yet you've opened the door for others. And you didn't even know the entire 5 hour flight on the other side of the country. These books are entering into the homes of other people, as they're right now they're on back order with Hilton Publishing Company. I went out to Amazon last night and saw we can get it there because we have to get more. I want you to know that's how important it is that you've done this great thing. uh, I think many should understand, if you're listening to this today, note that it's difficult enough being a parent of a child with zero chronic illnesses. There's enough to go through between the colicky times, between the 3 trimesters and 38 weeks before delivering the child, not to mention the cognitive things, making adjustments when there's separation because their first day of school. That's already tough enough for any parent, male or female. When you tie in something like, now, because that child has a chronic illness and they can't do recess the same way the other kids do, and they can't do gym class necessarily the way others do, or go swimming in the ice cold water like others do, amongst other things, there requires a specific amount of psychological development that has to occur in order for them to assimilate properly. So one thing I noticed in your book, that it does lay the groundwork, not just for the child, but for the parents. As parents have children reading these books, they get to help their parents to mature in this area and realize, hey, yes, I got 4 other kids, but it has to be different for him or her. And so this book helps them to identify that. What do you think? Am I off the mark there? Or maybe you can shed some more light on it. Maybe I'm not really in the right area as I talk about that.
I think this book really identifies the fact that Even if you have sickle cell, you can grow into your own person. And
Okay.
even though life might look a little different from others, there's ways to still shape and form the life that you want, making it your own journey, making it your own experience, like with my own daughters. Things
Yeah.
may not look like how it looks like for other children, but for them, it can look completely different. And that doesn't have to be devastating, but that can be um, it can be freeing to be
Yeah.
able to have a life of your own choosing at your own accord. And that's what this girl, Kenya, in my book, she's all about. She's all about writing her own story, being free within her own life despite her disease. And what that looks like for her is being at the beach on the sunset with her family. So this book really inspired me to make sure that children understand the psychological and the mental part about having sickle cell, that your life doesn't end in a hospital or start in a hospital. It ends, and your life can take you wherever you want it to take you despite your disease. And I'm hoping that people who read the book, they realize that Kenya, she is a hero in her own right. She's strong. She's dealing with things that adults have never encountered. And the way that she's handling it is freeing herself to not be limited. So I really, really, really hope that that is speaking to the children, where they feel that they have the hope to be who they want to be despite this disease. And even though the psychological, trauma that they may go through from the disease, because, you have to really look at sickle cell children, they're in the hospital all the time. And that in itself is a form of trauma. And
Yeah.
parents, I think as parents, we need to recognize that and make sure that we're doing a good, mindful job of handling and maintaining and managing their mental health needs as they go through their journey.
Which is really hard for a parent with or without a chronic illness in their child, right? That mental
Mhm.
health side is so, you know, it's a difficult thing. So I ask you this: did you foresee children without a chronic illness reading this and enjoying it just as much and finding their own some identity in theirs? Because as a child, some of us feel that my eyes are too far apart, or my nose is too skinny, or too wide, or people have psychological things to get through. When I read this, I see that even though I'm shorter than the other kids, I might find the superhero inside of me based on what I read here. And so maybe you didn't like any artist, you have one meaning, but there's so many meanings you can come across. Did you see that coming out of this, or is it just you're just excited that it does work that way?
Well, when I picked my characters in the story and the way that they look, I wanted it to relate to people, and then also just it to mean whatever it wants to mean to you. Sometimes our own perception of stories
Hmm.
can really lift us up and take us to other places. So I'm really happy that when a child read this book, even if they don't get the perception or the message that I'm trying to give them, they took something away from it, and
Yeah.
how that relates to them and what they're currently going through. And that's what it's about. It's really about touching people, and they can interpret it the way that they want. But as long as they take something from it and
Hmm.
they feel good about themselves, that's what I'm trying to do.
We're talking about sickle cell superheroes. In this book, we're going to find out in a few minutes of how you can get it. You want to get it, and here's what I'm going to let you know early on. You can read this book, and you don't have to have sickle cell. You don't even have to be black. You don't have to be a person of color at all. You're going to see and get something from it. It is educational in a way and palatable for a child, where it doesn't go over their head and bore them to death. It really teaches them, they're learning a little bit about science, exactly what that means with the red blood cells and things like that. So there's a lot here. Destiny, tell us, how can we get a hold of this book? How can I know how to get a hold of it, but let's tell our listeners how they can get a hold of the book so they can also be able to read it, share it, and those types of things.
So please, everyone, go to Amazon. My book is on sale on Amazon website, and it is Prime for those who have Prime.
Okay.
And
All right.
then also Hilton Publishing. You can go to their website, Hilton Publishing, and they have it there as well. And I'm hoping soon to get the book into a lot of hematology clinics
Okay.
for patients. That's my goal.
Well, I have a meeting coming up with our clinic. We have a here at the Hershey Penn State Medical Center, and we work directly with them. I am going to be sharing it with the lead pediatric um, physician and who works directly with a lot of our hematologists. I'm lucky enough that I used to be a drug rep. I know how to get in some doors, and certainly we're going to try that over. We might beat you to it.
Well, that was the goal also when I wrote the book. I felt that if children were introduced to this book at a very early age, it starts at the hematology clinic, right? They can be able to elaborate to their peers on what their disease is in a way that they understand. 'Cause, sickle cell is very difficult to understand, and I break it down in my book, how to explain what the disease is in a layman's terms for children to be able to discuss it amongst each other.
Okay.
So that is my goal too, to get it into a lot of hematology clinics around the country, because if children from ages 3 to 10 can start getting this book, they can feel more comfortable with discussing it with their peers and also their parents, talking to them about it and things like that.
Which is a whole nother vein, a whole nother avenue to uh, review this book. The other thing that I picked up on, Destiny, was that I'm a parent. I have 3 children and 6 grandchildren, so my kids are already grown. But if my children were younger, which I have sickle cell trait, and 2 of my children do, um, but even if that wasn't the case, I see that the book, by the parent reading the book, it helps the parent to have an empathy and see it from the kid's eyes. And I say that not only does it help the child, it helps the parent to be able to better communicate with them about the disease as they read it. So you've done, that's a beautiful thing about something that is done with the right foundation. It's going to have so many other benefits that you didn't count on when you started, but now that it's there, it's there. And I think that's what something you've done. And congratulations to you about it.
Thank you
Um,
so
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you've heard it. You can go to Amazon and get this book. And so you can get to Amazon and you will, let me just go ahead and, I'm looking inside the book right now with you, but I'm going to switch it out. You can go right to Amazon. You can see it right there on the screen and just type in and search Sickle Cell Superheroes. It's going to pop up, just $15.95. And what you would note is that you can also contact the Hilton Publishing Company if you want to order it in volume, and you can get it at even a potentially a discounted price if you're an entity. And so we don't want you to miss that. And you also have the ability to, you can contact us, and if you want to order some uh, for on behalf of someone else, you can actually contact us, and then we can make the order and send it to someone on your behalf. In the meantime, let's talk about something else, if you don't mind. And that is, first of all, I talk funny, I have some of an East Coast accent. Am I butchering your name? Destiny Van Scriver?
Van Skyver.
Say it again?
Van Skyver.
Van Skyver. I'm saying Scriver. See that, guys? See that? See that thing I keep that just okay, Skyver. Thank you. Because I don't want anyone contacting you or writing you based on the way I'm saying it. Destiny Van Scriver. Van Skyver. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna get
Van
it, okay?
Skyver.
Van Skyver. Okay, got it. Van Skyver. Um, I wanted to do that and make sure I didn't butcher your name. You deserve to have it pronounced correctly. Um, so you see my eagerness in a childlike way because I knew the book before I knew you. And I'm so sad that I didn't even know it was a Hilton Publishing Company book. When we were in discussion about interviewing some of their authors, I was just by happenstance that the author who wrote this book was on the list of one of the authors. So I appreciate that. I want you now, if you can, help us out. Help us, not from the author standpoint. We want to talk more about this whole idea of being a parent. Your experience in you and your husband finding out that your first child that was diagnosed with sickle cell. Tell us about that experience, and if now you may have already been prepared mentally or educationally of what it meant, but what happened for you guys at that point? You've this diagnosis now, and you have to discuss now how we're going to raise and prepare this child with this disease.
Well, when I found out that my daughter had sickle cell disease, it was an unusual way. I had to do a very many different tests. The newborn screening tests came back abnormal,
Okay.
but But it wasn't until me and my husband submitted blood tests that we were properly diagnosed with sickle cell SS. It was very, very shocking, very disheartening. At the time, I was 20 and I had no clue what sickle cell was, what it meant for my child and our future. My children are the first generation in our family that we know of to have sickle cell disease. So it was very difficult trying to get everyone up to speed and making sure that we, as a family, became educated in the treatment, the care, and what life will look like. So as soon as I found out, I received this book called Hope and Destiny.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure if any of the viewers are familiar with that book, but for me, it was a manual. I
Okay.
used it to educate myself. I studied everything in the book. It had pictures, and every stage of her development, there was something that related to what was going on. I took the book, I read it, I gave it to my husband, I gave it to my mother in law, gave it to my mom, gave it to everyone so that we, as her care providers, could be educated on what we needed to do.
Okay.
Even even after that, I went ahead and read studies, made sure I got into the right hematology clinic that can meet our family needs, and I made sure that I had the resources at home to really care for her in the way that she needed to be cared for.
Wow. So that's interesting because I made an assumption because of your educational background. And this is the power of why we do this podcast. You know, it's not uncommon before you've had your 10th birthday, you've heard of hemophilia in school. And you know what it means. If you have any friends, you already know how to be their friend and what to do there. It's the same thing with Down syndrome, muscular dystrophy, and so many other diseases. The one thing we've failed at here in the western part of the world, in the United States, is that sickle cell is the number one blood hereditary disease and is the least knowledge known about it. You
Yes.
could be college educated, even a physician who most physicians only have one day in their entire training where they talk about sickle cell. And so I find it interesting that having a undergrad in biology science that it wasn't a core part of the curriculum. And so I just think it's that this sheds light on it of why, think about it. You're the first generation you know of that where this identity exists. However, clearly there's been generations of sickle cell trait throughout. If we
Mm-hmm.
all have the opportunity to be educated what it means of sickle cell trait, when we reach and find the person we're going to spend the rest of our life with and procreate with, we can determine and have a head start on how we're going to love and care for our child and be prepared mentally and have the resources to do so. And so I think that's something that's extremely interesting. And that's why I asked you the question. I want to know which everybody's experience is the same. This is my experience as an interviewer. I have yet to find someone who says, "Oh yeah, I knew I had sickle cell trait. I knew that there was a 1 in 4 chance in each pregnancy that that child would have it. Me and my husband or me and my wife were already ready for it, and here's what we've done." The reason that is the case because we're failing. We're raising funds every year, and the feds are giving money, the states are giving money to keep organizations going, but we're failing at the education, the school, at primary education level, and secondary education level, and of course all others that follow it. So,
It,
un-
even more interesting, my
good.
mom and my family didn't even know we were carriers of the trait because the government didn't start testing for the trait or for sickle cell until the 90s. And I was born in the 80s. So my sister, it showed up on her newborn screening that she had the trait.
Mhm.
But for me and for my husband, there was no evidence, nothing that we were carriers or anything because it just wasn't a test that they were testing infants
Right.
at that time. So yeah, it was a huge shock for me to find out that something was wrong with my baby.
Yeah, and it's another thing. We're different states. I'm in Pennsylvania, and in the 1970s is when I learned that myself and a couple of my brothers have sickle cell trait. But even then, the doctor didn't even know what it meant. We asked my mom to
Mhm.
say, ask the doctor what it means, and he'd tell her that it means he's got a 4% chance of catching sickle cell disease. They didn't know. It's pretty pathetic. But I will say that in the 80s, my wife and I got married in 1988. 35 years coming up. Oh my gosh. Anyway, the before we got married, it was required we had to have a blood test.
Mm.
She's from Colombia, South America. I know already knew I had the trait, but they still had to do it. That which they just can reconfirm what I already knew about me, but she didn't have it. But when I asked, why does it matter? Why do you care? Guess what? They didn't have an answer for. We're just required to do it. And so there's
Mm.
such a missing element when it comes to something that affects a much smaller population. We overeducate it in health class, even in second and third grade. We're just failing at the legislative level, and that's why I like the SED stories. So the stories will tell you why. That's the evidence that's needed. We can look at data, which unfortunately, data lies. Doesn't lie itself. Data lies when it's applied. For example, in our state, there's mandatory screening at birth, right? But
Hmm.
there are people that migrate in from other states that weren't born here in other countries. Then there's people that were tested at birth who migrate out to another state. Then there's those who they were tested at birth, and at the at-risk communities, most of them live in transitional housing. A great portion of the at-risk community who may have the trait and be tested or the baby be screened and maybe even have a disease. When the lab results come back and are mailed home, the home was never permanent. It was just they were living with a friend while they were pregnant, or Section 8, which was ending at a certain time, and they never find out. So states and feds are providing money based on that data. The usage of the data is not accurate. And so that's why these stories, your story matters. Your book matters. Everything that you and your husband and your daughters are doing matters so much. And we have to tell the world. And that's why I'm so grateful that you are humble and with all you have going on, you've taken the time to be with us. I can only say that I hope that there's a sequel and that there are other versions coming.
Well, I love the sickle cell community, and I feel that this community is not as representative I would like it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many children out there that are suffering and not getting the care that they need. And a lot of sickle cell families, unfortunately, like you were talking about those statistics, they become into poverty because the financial burden that the parents have to manage while caring for their children. And those statistics are not always accurate because we need more funding for this disease. We need more help with these families so that they can continue with treatment and not worry about the financial burden of making a conscious choice of being there for their child or going to work and following through with treatment. So I'm so proud of this podcast because I'm hoping that this will speak to legislation on making bills that protect families with sickle cell disease so that they can be successful.
Well, I believe it will. I've recently been talking to a corporation who is backing and help funding to make sure these type of things are done legislatively. I'm sure you're probably familiar with the Vertex Corp. They are behind helping getting. They open doors and they take care of the breakfast is over. We go in and we hammer our way and chisel at these kinds of things. But it's certainly going to be a lot easier as we have stories like yours out there. You and your lovely daughters and the dynamic team that you and your husband are. Um,
Yeah,
I
there's so many untold stories about children live even children with sickle cell right now living on Skid Row here in downtown LA. There's no stories that highlight what those children are going through.
wow.
And sickle cell is a healthcare disparity right now. So it's important that leaders in the community like us do our part to shed light on what's going on and do our part to help influence change as much as possible.
Well, I say you're doing that, and what I love is how you're all inclusive. I keep coming back to the book because I want folks to order that. I want folks to get this book. Um, as we have some even as far away as Turkey or France, and like I said, Pakistan and India, who subscribe and follow us. I think I want people to get the book. I'm going to take another excerpt. Something that caught my attention is how you're all inclusive in the message. So parents are accounted for, the children are accounted for, children and individuals with or without sickle cell are accounted for, and you did a great job at involving in this messaging, you included in this whole superhero world the caregivers as well. And I'm gonna take a brief part of this. So I wanted to pull this up, and what you're looking at. Well, for those if you're listening, we're looking at a physician talking to the star of the show, right? The one this book is all about, and what she's doing is she's saying my medical heroes love to teach sickle cell heroes like me and about our special blood and how to handle pain and that we sometimes feel. And so oftentimes oftentimes the children develop their own perspective based on their parents' response and frustration, and they don't get the opportunity to um, they don't get the opportunity to have their own thoughts. But what I love you're doing in the book is you're demonstrating this peaceful collaboration between the patient and the doctor. As a child who grew up hearing my parents say, "Look, I can't believe he pulled that needle out," and sometimes getting angry, the child doesn't get a chance to establish their own perspective. What you've done in the book is so amazing that you've conscious or subconscious, I don't really care, because
Con-
it's working. Was it conscious?
con- yes, it's definitely and so important for the children to engage in their own health care. That scene in the book, it reminds me of my daughter talking to her doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a way, if you let your child get involved in their own healthcare and speak up, they can build rapport and also, build trust with the doctors, and
Mm-hmm.
have their voice being heard. I think it's so important to allow a child to have a voice in their own healthcare because they can, let you know what works for them and advocate for themselves. And it's a stepping stone on learning how to advocate for your needs. So it's so important that we allow our children to collaborate in their care because when they get older, they'll have to take it over someday.
Yeah, and the way Kenya does it in this book, it's like, okay, I don't have sickle cell, but I have to go to the dentist. Now I don't have to see them as the enemy. Just the approach. It doesn't matter. There's so many different ways it can be received. And so great work. Now do you see why I say there needs to be the other pieces? When I say pieces, that means what's next, right? Does Kenya
Yes.
have a brother or cousin that you write about? Is there a workbook that I can work through with my crayons or something? There's good. What's next? There's got to be. It's that good. It's not that you can't, right? Because scarcity makes people want it more. But I really believe you certainly can add some additional pieces that the rest of us will crave and want to participate with. So,
Yeah,
um,
I
but
definitely want to give the readers something in the future, but I also like to, establish work that has something from my heart and something that is important to me and something that I'm doing consciously to really connect with people and to let them understand the journey that we're going on and how it's impacted our family and how that translates to them and to possibly their own journey. So I definitely see myself doing some more work in the future, but I really want to be conscious and
yeah,
be formative to the community.
right. More than quantity, you want the quality of that primero first, right? And
Yes.
yeah, I get it. You know what you're listening to is you're listening to Destiny Van Sciver, who is the author of Sickle Cell Heroes and a mother of two sickle cell children, the wife of a husband who her and her husband tag team to do a great job with these girls, but yet opening their hearts up to make sure that other boys and girls around the world can learn from their experiences. And once again, go to Amazon, search for Sickle Cell Heroes, get the book, be in support of more children learning about this, and at the same time, whether they have sickle cell or not, if you got a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, get the book. Let them read it. Give them, turn up their mobile device and their cartoons, and let them read about something. They can let them see themselves in a different light. There are some young people, uh, Destiny, who really aren't comfortable with being around their friends because of their weight, even though they're young. They don't know that it doesn't matter that much. They don't know that they're a superhero and they can look at it differently. And so I encourage you as you listen today, don't miss your opportunity. Get over to Amazon right away, and it's not on back order there. I know it's on back order with the Hilton Publishing, so I know that at Amazon you can get it. And now, I want Destiny to leave you with, give us three things you would want our listeners to be able to get from Sickle Cell Superheroes that maybe we wouldn't find on our own without you tipping us off or something. What is it you desire out of the reader who's going to read your book?
I would like the reader, especially the children, to take away from this strength that you are strong. You are a hero in your own right. And I always look at my daughters and I'm like, man, like they're so strong, they're so resilient. And I hope this book that you see yourself in that light and you love yourself and that you just know that you are meant to be here and everything that you're going through is just going to make you that much stronger and loved. And people around you who read this book, they will understand what sickle cell is and be more informed so that they can be understanding of your situation and your journey. And I just hope that all the kids that read this book, they know how much of a hero they really are, truly are.
You're listening to Destiny Van Sciver, Dwayne Golden, and we are ecstatic that you've joined us today. I will ask you, in support of not just sickle cell disease itself, certainly contact us if you would like a book and you're unable to get it, but it really would be important for you, for your children, or your family, or someone you know that has sickle cell or not. Let us know. We'll do what we can to make sure that we can secure a book for you. In the meantime, Destiny, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us. You so graciously have held in there, even though I went overtime, because I think we probably could talk about this for a couple more hours.
Oh, I could talk about it. I love that book. I just love it so much.
Yeah. Well, you've done great. I'm going to make sure that my grandson doesn't have sickle cell trait, but my granddaughter does. But he just loves to read everything, right? We got six grandkids, and one of them's at reading age level, and the others are getting there. We're going to make sure that it's certainly going to be used in my family as well. God bless you and your husband and all you do, and I hope we can call you back either before or by the time you start your next project, whatever it is. We'd love to have you back for another interview next year to just kind of track how your girls are doing. And once again, thank you for being with us. You're listening to SED Stories. This is Dwayne Golden and Destiny Van Sciver. As we end up on today's podcast, we greatly appreciate you listening, and certainly get the book. Take care.